Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these trying times. Our first story today: this past weekend, the Kansas City Chiefs football team won their first Super Bowl in over 50 years. So as means of celebrating the historic victory, one of the team's players decided to pay it forward to his city's local animal shelter. Following his Super Bowl triumph, defensive tackle Derek Nady volunteered to pay for all of the adoption fees at the KC Pet Project in Kansas City, Missouri. Adoption fees typically cost about $150 per pet, but thanks to Nady's contribution, 38 dogs and 6 cats were adopted into the loving forever homes for free. And 30 more animals are expected to go home to their new families today as well. This is not the first time that Nady has used his football success to help shelter animals. For every one of his team's wins during the season, he volunteered to pay for an animal's adoption fee at KC Pet Project through his own foundation. Collectively, the team won 15 times, including the postseason. After qualifying for the Super Bowl, Nady promised to pay for the adoption fees for all 109 dogs of his team won. News of his compassionate gesture was shared across national news outlets until there was a crowd of potential adopters waiting outside the animal shelter, waiting to take home a furry companion. Wow, what a day, the KC Pet Project wrote. We want to thank all of the families who came out today and patiently waited to adopt a pet. We're beyond grateful to Derek and for this incredible gesture in helping our city's pets. For other local Kansas City families interested in adopting a pet, the shelter says that there should be about 40 more animals who will qualify for the sponsorship this week. Kansas City Chiefs defensive tackle Derek Nady has been praised across social media since he celebrated his Super Bowl win by covering the adoption fees of $109 from his animal shelter. However, Coors Light is also hoping to reinforce the NFL players' good deed for Valentine's Day by encouraging people to adopt ahead of the Hallmark holiday, and they're even offering to foot the bill. I can't imagine for a more romantic gesture to receive a puppy. So between the 4th and 21st of February, Coors is helping pay for up to 1,000 dog adoptions across the United States. The beer brand is covering up to $100 for each rescued canine, which will result in more than $100,000 worth of free adoptions. With almost half of millennials planning to stay in on Valentine's Day, we wanted to help empower people to savor the day with Coors Light and a dog by their side, said Chelsea Parker, the marketing manager at Molson Coors. There's no beer purchase necessary to participate in the offer, but there are some caveats to the offer. Participants must be 21 years or older to be reimbursed for their adoptions. In-state residents from California, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, South Dakota, Texas, Virginia, and West Virginia are excluded from the initiative, and participants will only be reimbursed through the Venmo banking app, although it's free to make an account. After that, participants are simply required to submit a photo with their adoption receipt by texting a number with a code. So if you're interested in this, you can go to the Coors websites to find that. One more little fun beer and dog story. Fido's Tap House is being hailed as the world's first bar and restaurant that also doubles as a foster home for pups that were rescued from kill shelters in Southern California. Since the Portland-based establishment opened in 2018, they've helped over 70 different shelter dogs find homes. Fido's founder, Scott Porter, says he was inspired to launch the Tap House after he learned about cat cafes. Cat cafes, obviously are a very incredible initiative where they foster cats that have kind of homes in these cafes and can be adopted from there. Additionally, he hopes that foster dogs will help give families some kind of love and therapeutic support that his own dogs have given him. My own dogs have helped me through some pretty severe depression, he told Today in a video article. They were extremely loving and attentive to me, and they understood that I was going through some tough times. I feel that pets, dogs, and cats are really attuned to that. I have noticed it with my own cat, really kind of sensing when I was down and being right there and in when she needed to comfort me. The bar typically accommodates 3 or 4 shelter dogs at a time in a room that is separated from the dining area, although their facilities are equipped to house 8. If a potential adopter decides to adopt one of the lucky pups, they're required to wait 3 days before signing the paperwork so that the staffers can be sure that alcohol did not influence the decision. I think that's probably a very, very smart way of doing it. Just in case, it's obviously much safer to just ensure that that this was a decision that they would make soberly, because taking on a dog is a massive responsibility. You are caring for a living creature. So I love all of these stories of helping out with adoptions and the generosity of people, especially the first one, offering all of those incredible adoption fees just completely by himself to celebrate his own win. So congratulations to Kansas City. Congratulations to the players. And thank you so much for starting that. That was really, really incredible, really kind, very, very selfless of this incredible football player to do. Very important to find homes for these domesticated animals that won't necessarily do well in the wild like they would have done before we domesticated them. So it's really beautiful. It's really, really sweet of them to do that. When we return from the break, we are going to talk about some incredible work by first responders in a couple of different situations in a couple of different states. So we're going to talk about those incredible stories when we return from our break. So don't go away and stay tuned for just coming up after this.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back from the break. Before we took a short break, we were talking about the generosity of an incredible Kansas City football player, as well as a few different places that were helping to find some dogs' homes that had otherwise not had them. And now that we've returned, we're going to talk about some incredible work done by America's first responders. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, and I probably don't need to convince you, that first responders are absolute heroes. They go through so much, and they still continue to surprise me with their heroic nature and generosity every day. So, these stories are just some particularly lovely examples of first responders just being lovely people and being heroes and going above and beyond the call of duty just to make our country incredible. This first story, these compassionate Florida firefighters are being hailed for going above and beyond the call of duty to help a family that in need during a medical emergency. Captain Dennis Noble and firefighters Joe Clark and Dwayne Norman were just a few of the first responders who rushed to the rescue of a family of 4 whose minivan had run out of gas while driving to the hospital. Since one of the family members had been experiencing a medical emergency at the time, paramedics treated them on site before transporting them to the hospital themselves. However, this left the rest of the family stranded on the side of the road with a quickly deflating tire, an empty gas tank, and no money to fill it up. Noble, Norman, and Clark took it up upon themselves to push the minivan a quarter of a mile to the nearest gas station. But they didn't stop there. They also paid to fill up the family's gas tank, and they fixed a leaky tire as well. The Hernando County Fire Rescue later published the photo of the 3 Good Samaritans pushing the vehicle on social media to praise them for their kindness. The post read, "This truly exemplifies the meaning of why the HCFR exists, to serve others." And serve others they did. This is just one of those incredibly selfless and lovely news stories that really, really brings me faith in humanity. Because that is absolutely not something that they needed to do. That's absolutely not a part of the call of duty to push a truck like that. And then to pay for the gas and fix the tire. It's really incredible. That must have been a very distressing car ride for the family involved. And I'm just so touched and proud of the first responders taking that on and behaving in such a lovely, beautiful way. And that's not our only first responder news that I found this week. This is another story that of the brave first responders that take their lives into their hands every day. And not only do they do that, but they have incredible personable skills that they used to calm down a very anxious girl who just experienced some very scary stuff. So this story hails from Utah, when 2 firefighters, again, went above and beyond to calm an anxious little girl who'd just been in a car collision. According to a Facebook post from the North Davis Fire District, Chief Hadley and Captain Lloyd were some of the first responders to arrive on the scene of a crash earlier this week. Though none of the drivers or passengers were seriously injured in the collision, there was a screaming little girl who was very scared after the experience. And not unsurprisingly, for those of you that have experienced a car crash, it can be very traumatizing. Your body goes into shock. You can't fully recognize what's happened, if you're safe, if everyone around you is safe. And when you're very young, it's very hard for you not to realize that it's not going to happen again or that you're going to be okay. And it can take years to recover if there isn't intervention. However, these first responders were very quick to intervene to calm her down in just the sweetest way that I can imagine. So what happened, after noticing the child was holding bottles of fingernail polish, these 2 officers started talking to her about her polish and then asked if she would paint their nails. Within minutes, the child was calmly painting their nails and had forgotten about the accident that she just experienced. Though the manicure was not necessarily the tidiest paint job, thousands of social media users have praised the firefighters for their kindness. That was very, very lovely and smart thinking of them, because that could have easily become such a source of trauma to her. I know it would have done for me, but what a delightfully sweet way to get to know the little girl, to share her interests, to make her feel not only calm and make her forget about what had just happened to her, but also to make her have this lovely connection with these firefighters that she will probably always remember. I can't imagine forgetting that lovely experience. And as if firefighters needed anything else to be chivalrous and gallant. They really are such heroes and such incredible people. And these are some more really delightful stories that make me feel so proud of the first responders and everything that they do. I mean, they're just so incredible, aren't they? So that's actually, that comes to a conclusion of the first response stories for the past couple of days. So that's very, very lovely. I'm sure that there are more. If you have some more, please share with us. I'm always very happy to hear about stories such as that. I really will never, ever get sick of hearing first responder stories and lovely stories about adults connecting with children in such a way. I love when there's an intergenerational link. Obviously, I love that. There's a lot of stories about that. We actually are going to be talking about an intergenerational connection later on today, as we do for most pods. When we come back, we're going to talk about some scientific advancements in research.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. So before the break, as I'm sure you already remember and have been thinking about, we were talking about the bravery, selfless acts, and just lovely nature of our first responders who really just always restore faith in humanity for me. Now we're going to talk about some scientific advancements in research in particular that have been making advancements in the safety of clean water all over. We're going to talk about a few different stories about that. For many of the world's poorest nations, one of the greatest environmental threats to health remains a lack of access to clean, safe water. Thankfully, scientists at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, have identified highly absorbent materials that can be extracted from record-breaking amounts of drinkable water out of thin air. This could potentially lead to technologies that supply potable water in the driest areas of the planet. The researchers, a team from APL's Research and Exploratory Development Department led by Zhongzia, Matthew Logan, and Spencer Lagavin, described their discovery in this week's issue of Scientific Reports, a journal of the Nature Research family. Their research leverages metal organic frameworks, an amazing next-generation material that has the largest known surface areas per gram. 1 single gram of this can soak up a football field's worth of material if the material were laid in a single layer across the field. These sponge-like crystals can be used to capture, store, and release chemical compounds like water, and the large surface area offers more space for chemical reactions and absorption of molecules. There's also promise for water harvesting, but little research has been done to determine the best properties for fast and efficient production of water. Initial experiments have proved that a concept can actually work. The problem has been capacity. Our research teams have been able to produce as much as 1.3 liters of water per day per kilogram of sorbent under arid conditions, enough for one person. To create the optimal water harvesting device requires a better understanding of structure, property relationship, controlling absorption, and delivery. Zia and his team studied a series of MOFs unraveling the fundamental material properties that govern the kinetics of water secretion under this class of materials, as well as investigating how much water they can absorb. They also explored the potential impact of temperature, humidity, and powder bed thickness of absorption-desorption process to see which one achieved optimal operational parameters. We identified an MOF that could produce 8.66 liters of water per day per kilogram under ideal conditions, an extraordinary finding. This will help us deepen our understanding of these materials and guide to the discovery of the next generation of water harvesting methods. So they're exploring now relative humidity influx points, high surface areas, and polar function properties to see how they perform in very dry environments. They're also exploring different configurations to determine which allow for optimal absorption. This is from drawing on ongoing efforts to purify water, and they've developed a novel way to remove high toxic substances. And a separate effort yielded cost-effective method to remove toxic heavy metals from drinking water. So these are all huge, huge feats to save the world, really. We really look forward to saving the planet one drop at a time, they said. In other water news, over the last 5 years, this Kenyan region has been suffering from debilitating drought, but they've finally been given the gift of clean water thanks to new solar-powered desalination plant. Prior to the plant's launch in the town of Kiung, villagers had completely run out of clean drinking water and had instead resorted to using dirty well water and salt water from the Indian Ocean. Now, the solar water farm produces enough clean drinking water that more than 35,000 people every single day for them to drink. And not only that, the water has been shown to be even cleaner than typical desalination plants. The desalination farm is just the latest project launched by Give Power, an international non-for-profit dedicated to using renewable energy as means of bringing water, food, and energy to the places that need it most. In addition to successfully launching the solar water farm, the foundation has also brought renewable energy to over 2,500 schools in 17 different countries, benefiting more than 30,000 people. Those are incredible numbers of renewable energy and incredible numbers of clean water that these countries so desperately, desperately need. Following the unparalleled success of the water farm in Kiunga, the group now plans on building similar facilities in other drought-prone areas, such as Colombia and Haiti. So that's some water research that I found to be incredibly uplifting and advancements in this really important research that will save our planet and save our people. So, just beautiful stuff coming out of the scientific communities. Really very, very impressive. And just absolutely, very absolutely lovely stuff coming out of there. I always talk about the environment on this show and the incredible things that are being done to the environment, because while there is a bleak outlook on it, I do want to remind everybody that a lot is happening. A lot is happening to combat these things that are happening in the world. And while obviously more needs to be done, it's great to be able to celebrate what does get done. So, just remember that there's good stuff coming out, guys, and things are still happening. When we return, a bit more research.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before we left off, we were talking about some research that's going to ensure our planet has a lot more water that's being reproduced, and that people will be having clean drinking water available to them. And now we go to Harvard Medical School, where they found evidence that a human microbiome has a greater power of detecting disease and predicting mortality than the current applications derived from genetic mapping. This remarkable finding was achieved by examining 47 studies that looked at the relationship between the genetic makeup of gut microbes and the association with 13 diseases such as hypertension, asthma, and schizophrenia. These were compared with the 24 gene-wide association studies, which correlate specific human genetics with various diseases. This has been such a major strength of studies in the past, such as meta-analysis, that have been used to determine major findings, like the melatonin receptor gene of the pancreas that inhibits insulin release. These are parts of research that have saved so many lives over the time. Studies find the number one associated genetic marker for obesity, which had led for the time-restrictive eating that are now popular today. However, the paper published in the scholarly report site bioRxiv demonstrated that the microbiome was 20% better at predicting the illnesses in people than the GWA studies. In some circumstances, the margin was far greater. For instance, the microbiome is 50% more accurate in predicting colorectal cancer than the individual's own genetics. The understanding of this powerful influence is that the human microbiome has our physiology on a growing scale. The more we perform this type of research, it's described as our second genome due to its importance for understanding genetic factors that influence disease and health. Datasets from the American and Brit Gut projects have deepened our understanding for the complex interactions between food, genetics, and lifestyle. In the colonies of trillions of tiny organisms that live in our skin, brains, and GI tracts. But microbiome species diversity has been theorized as an important role. There are several other diseases it's been important with. So that's a huge feat. Lots to learn from that, and very exciting to get to learn about these things that could be caused by genetics. Speaking of these ways of diagnosing things, there's a Center for Microbiology that talked about genetics and microbiomes having a link to how we respond to diets and how that might affect how we move and how our GI moves, and I might explain some issues with IBS or IBDs, irritable bowel syndromes or disorders. So here are 10 discoveries from Viome Uncovered. So number 1 is healthy food isn't always healthy. You might have been advised to eat your greens. However, that's not always true. Spinach, bran, rhubarb beets, nuts, and nut butters all contain oxalate, which can be harmful unless you use the microbiomes present to metabolize this into a non-harmful substance. Antioxidants are good for everyone. Again, like oxalates, phospholipid foods are considered healthy unless you have the appropriate you might not have that ability to digest them. Without the microbes to do this, you may not benefit from the acid in these foods. After analyzing tens of thousands of people, they report that only 50% of people benefit from eating these. Number 3, are you eating too much protein? The keto diet doesn't actually work for everyone. If you eat too much protein, it can cause inflammation and decrease longevity. An activity of your microbiome to determine whether you are eating too much has suggested that it can damage your gut, leading to leaky gut. Very uncomfortable thing. Can healthy foods exacerbate heart disease? Well, it turns out that certain foods can get converted by bacteria into TMA, which is associated with heart disease. When absorbed into your body and converted to TMAO, the conversion doesn't happen in individuals unless they've come into the appropriate contact with bacteria and their microbiomes. Otherwise, it's not super helpful. Too much iron can also cause inflammation. Stress and anxiety may appear in your microbiomes. Your microbiomes actually affect your energy and can cause joint pain. The link between low stomach acid and chronic heart disease is that the acid in your stomach protects you from the bacteria in your mouth. However, when you have low stomach acid, the bacteria from your mouth makes it down your GI tract, and the invasion can lead to autoimmune disease and inflammation in the gut. Carbs can be protein precursors. Despite popular thought, carbs aren't as bad as you think. The key to whether your microbiome can transform the starches you eat into amino acids means your microbiome is hooking up carbons and hydrogens into different formulations depending on what you feed it. Microbiome is an excellent way of adapting and pivoting based on your diet and environment. So obviously what we've learned from this little study is that your tummy can actually determine a lot of things for you. And if you want to learn more about your specific tummy, you can get some Viome kits to find out some personal recommendations for your body and how to take care of it, or see a doctor and talk about what sort of diet plan is right for you if you are having gut issues and problems. I know I have them myself. When we come back, some dancing to aid Alzheimer's when we return.
pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some incredible medical and research advancements that have been happening all over to help with your stomach health and the aid of clean water. Now we're going to talk about something that we've kind of touched on in different ways on the pod before. And these are ways in which Alzheimer's can be aided and relieved through music. But today we're going to be talking about how it can be relieved through dance. In this volunteer-run partner dance class, seniors suffering from dementia are able to regain a little bit of their former selves with every step. At the ballroom of Reno in Nevada, dozens of Alzheimer's patients and their partners are able to attend dementia-friendly dance classes that teach everything from swing dancing to waltz. Not only do the classes help bring seniors out of isolation, they also offer a number of physical and cognitive benefits, which collectively make the perfect combination for brain growth, says class instructor Desiree Reed. Ballroom dancing, specifically partner dancing, grounds them and says, "This is here. This is now." It gives us more cognitive function, paired with the physical connection of people's hands and music to solidify all of those things that we learn. Whether the attendees are taking classes to prevent dementia symptoms or simply to fight memory loss and cognitive decline, the classes have already had a dramatic impact on the participants. It changes everyone's personality, says one of the elderly dancers in a news interview. Everyone is very subdued when they come in, and the minute the music starts, everyone's happy. Everyone's having a good time. So it's like you just put an hour of the disease behind you. This is not the first time that dancing has been shown to combat Alzheimer's and senior isolation, which is why class instructors are hoping to recruit additional volunteers to help these dementia-friendly dance classes. In other news of a similar vein, girls aren't the only ones that want to have fun. Dozens of elderly men and women in South Korea are also raving about the benefits of their new daytime disco club. Dance parties in Seoul are the first ever events of their kind that are funded by the government in order to combat senior loneliness, isolation, and dementia. South Korea currently has the fastest growing aging population of any developed nation in the world. Roughly 14% of the country's population was made up of citizens over the age of 65 to about 6.8 million people. As the world becomes increasingly aware of the dangerous health risks of loneliness, communities and countries have tried to help with everything from pairing aging nuns with millennials to enlisting the help of a mailman to check up on senior homeowners. One popular UK supermarket chain even used talking tables initiatives for strangers to chat with each other, which is something that actually comes up in the TV show Fleabag, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. In South Korea, a gentleman told the BBC interview, "I have had a bad back and legs, but when the music comes on, my body is immersed, and all my pain disappears. I'm full of energy for 2 to 3 days after. No lie," he added with a laugh. "I've even kicked my drugs and supplements." So those are 2 examples of some incredible dance classes that are helping the elderly through these declines in cognition, helping them to lead more fulfilling lives. One more story on this: champagne spraying, flapper girls dancing, and people dressed to impress. And the 1940s music isn't the only thing getting older with age. The Posh Club, a unique venue that hosts swanky soirees, exclusively attended by older folks from all over East London. None of the guests are under the age of 60, except the volunteers. The festivities are hosted at 2 p.m. rather than 2 a.m. The club's mission is to offer a fun outlet for seniors to meet, to socialize, and of course, to party. And so far, it's been highly successful. Women wear their best dresses. Men wear cravats. Volunteers serve high tea and champagne. And there's often an Elvis impersonator dominating the stage. All of this fun isn't just for kicks. This chain of day clubs hope that their social events become recognized as a public health activity. Studies have shown that communal activities amongst older people to improve cognition and confidence is the best way to decrease anxiety and, of course, depression. The promoters of the event are roughly 6 months away from finishing a study showing the positive health effects of these events. Once the research is complete, the club can secure funding for the future so they can continue hosting many more ladies and gentlemen at the clubs so the show can go on. What we're doing is really an anti-loneliness campaign presented as a club event, Dickie Eaton said, the producer of the event. A lot of our guests maybe don't get out as much as they once did and don't see friends often. This provides a unique way to do both, while also being a part of something that's just vibrant and exciting. Just because you reach a certain age doesn't mean you don't want to have fun anymore. I think society has a habit of forgetting that. A lot of what we, as younger people, do to enjoy ourselves, they've not only seen it and done it, they invented most of it. I think those are really some beautiful ways to remind them of their youth, and I hope that these things continue to receive funding as they're very, very important. When we come back, a roundup of good news from the week.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of incorporating the performing arts, namely dance, into the lives of patients with dementia. And now, we're going to talk about a quick roundup of some really nice, lovely, happy stories from the past few days. These patients had a sickle cell disease, and experimental therapies may have cured them. A single mutation in one errant gene causes disease, which has devastating effects. But advocates in gene therapy have scientists talking about the possibility of a cure. In a half a dozen clinical trials planned or underway, researchers are testing strategies for correcting the problem at a genetic level. Already, a handful of enrolled patients who have endured an illness that causes excruciating bouts of pain, strokes, and early death no longer show signs of the disease. So that is one beautiful thing. Number 2, Barakat pava, the highest volume fish cutter in the Boston wholesalers wolffish, shows in videos his knife skills, and this has drawn hundreds of thousands of views and comments from admirers across the world who are mesmerized by his swift, graceful movements to break down these fish into fillets in seconds. Even more impressive, he's only been doing it for the past decade and had never touched a knife before that. Well, a filleting knife at least. He was actually a professional soccer player in Brazil before this. And our next story, Thunderbird American Indian Dancers are the oldest all-volunteer troupe of their kind in New York. They also raise scholarship funds for Native American students. Their repertory has grown to encompass dances from all across America and parts of Canada. And a recent program features a deer dance from the Yaqui tribes of southern Arizona and New Mexico, amongst many, many others. Another story, researchers are seeking superpowers in the genes of axolots. As long as you don't cut off their heads, these smiling salamanders can grow back to a nearly perfect replica of any body part, including half of their brains. To understand how they evolved to this level of healing, researchers looked to the animal's genome, which is actually 10 times larger than a human genome. They reported that most complete assembly of the DNA for the striking creatures. This work paves the way for advancements in regenerative medicine. So instead of amputees receiving donations, they might be able to grow them back. Our next story, an orchestra is fighting the stigma of mental illness through music. Ronald Bronstein, who has bipolar disorder, has experienced the benefit of music for his own mental health. He's set to bring it to others by funding orchestras in which all the performers have been affected by mental illness. His new venture was called the Me Too Orchestra because when he told other musicians about the diagnosis, they all said, "Me too." At each performance, the musicians talk about their mental illness and take questions. Instead of thinking about people with mental illness as lazy or dangerous, we want them to see what we're capable of. It has positive effects on all of us. In France, the best days of the comic book may be yet to come. There are now more comic books published annually in France and Belgium than ever before, according to artistic director of the Angoulême International Comics Festival in France, which finished last Sunday. The market has risen from 700 books a year in the 1990s to none other than 5,000 this year, he said in an interview. I don't know any cultural industry which has that kind of increase. The attendance at the festival by government officials underscored the way the ninth art, as comic books are sometimes referred to in France, is not a niche pursuit, but a mainstream activity. I know several people that were comic book fanatics and still are comic book fanatics that would be absolutely overjoyed to hear that. As it is February, aka Black History Month, you can see in the New York Times 100 photos that are still up to celebrate the 100th anniversary, 100th birthday of Jackie Robinson. These are all images of the incredibly famous baseball player, a change agent, human being, and humanitarian. Many of the selections come out from the archives, rounded out with images from other sources. And though he's been gone now for nearly as long as he lived, Mr. Robinson's legacy continues to live on. Jackie Robinson, born 100 years ago in Georgia, burst on the stage in 1947 as a 28-year-old rookie into the Dodger flannels. An incredible man, an incredible legacy, never be forgotten, the retired number, the absolute force of a baseball player that broke the divide. An incredible man that will be remembered forever. So that is it for our roundup today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I've really enjoyed this one, and I hope that you did as well. There is beauty in America. So guys, let's try harder to see it. Thank you for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review and rate the episode. That helps us a lot as well. Also, please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much and have a great night. Talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.